To start. So I'm going to share the findings. This is a combination of, I guess, 8 weeks of work that we put in from September to October, with your help, of course, when you kindly agreed to join us on the interview. And I'm going to take you through what we've done, why we're doing it, and some of our findings as well. So if you can't hear me, please let me know. Please send me a little chat message, or just interrupt me if I'm not clear enough or loud enough. Okay. So yeah, so a bit of a background to this project. So back in June 2020, I was looking at the ONS statistics during the lockdown. And I realized that there has been a very marked trend in terms of the number of startups, according to the ONS. And I've just quoted this bit from Enterprise Nation, which says that there was 77,574 new company formations. And this was compared to 52,779 in the same period last year. So just give me a sec. Right. Yeah. So there has been a 47% growth according to Enterprise Nation. And this is quite a marked increase. And if you follow the ONS statistics, you'll soon notice that this trend continues, obviously, as unemployment is rising and will continue to rise until next year. So this is a project which is funded by Kingston University, and we surveyed 100 business owners, at least 100 business owners, most of whom, about 85% of these owners, have actually made a transition from the 9 to 5 to running their own business. So they have been in business for at least 2 or more years, relatively experienced. We wouldn't call them startups anymore. And so for September to October, we ran marketing campaigns on LinkedIn, which was hugely successful, Instagram, and also email as well amongst our team. So there were 4 of us doing the marketing, running the marketing campaigns. And we got people to essentially either book a 20-minute Zoom call with us, where we could ask them questions one-to-one, or to complete an online survey if they choose to. Great, thanks, Matt. And moving on to the next slide. So just a bit about me before I go on to talk about findings. Oh, am I frozen? Can anyone see the slides at all, or are you okay with the slides? I'll just pause for a few seconds. Oh, okay, fantastic. Right. Thanks, everyone. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So just a bit about me. I run a marketing consultancy for small, medium-sized businesses, and together with technology partners based in the UK, they're all based in the UK, we deliver solutions such as app, web, search engine optimization, and also B2B LinkedIn marketing services as well. So really, I would see myself more than just an app developer or web developer or SEO provider. I would work with the business providing all-round 360 marketing advice without the techno speak or the corporate speak to help the business generate results. And why did I start this project? This 8-week project? Well, the reason why I started was, well, I had this idea during the lockdown, and when I saw the ONS stats, I knew there was a trend, and this was quite a big trend, and it was worth investigating. Now, when I made the switch myself from corporate life, from the 9 to 5 to running my own business, I had no clue at all what it would be like to start a business. My family and friends were mostly employed in professional jobs, so I didn't really have a business model or a mentor that I could rely on. So when I made a transition from corporate life to running my own little business, I had to rewire my brain to think in a different way, as there were so many things I just simply took for granted, as you can imagine. So although I realized there are loads and loads and loads of information out there on socials and on Google about starting a business, a lot of this information was all hyped up. It was hyped up information, and it was full of hero stories, success stories that just didn't provide a realistic view of what it's really like as a business owner. So I wanted to hear it from the business owners themselves, from yourselves, who've actually been there and done it, and then compile what you have to say, your insights, and hopefully provide some value to startups. I wanted to provide some sort of balance to our experiences, to what it was like, to our stories, to starting a business, if that makes sense. I hope it does. So that's my story, my little backstory of why I started. Right, so coming to the findings. So what we did was we surveyed more than 100 businesses. They are SMEs with 1 to 150 employees. So that would be more medium-sized business. And as you can see on this chart, the businesses come from a huge, a really diverse range of businesses. And honestly, I couldn't classify them into the SIC codes, the industrial classification codes that, you know, the government would have you classify yourself as, because I felt that it didn't really do much justice to the types of businesses that we have. And this is a reflection of modern businesses today. So as you can see on this chart, we have businesses from all different sectors: beauty, health, recruitment, consulting. So they do range from the traditional business, such as accountancy practice, a recruitment firm, for example. We have a couple of recruitment firms as well during the interview that we interviewed, or a cafe. These are what I would consider more traditional businesses with a more traditional business model, to niche businesses such as women's walking and coaching group, which is more niche and not that traditional, I would think. So really wide diversity of businesses. I couldn't actually, to be honest, I couldn't actually quite classify all of them. So I put the rest of them under a category called others. And these include businesses in vehicle leasing, relocation, photography, copywriting, dance, virtual assistants, pets, and security services. So with that, let's look into our findings. So one of the questions that we asked during the interview was why they started. What was it that made you want to start your own business, if some of you may recall? And what you gave was a whole range of different reasons, some with redundancy. So they were being pushed, external factors, I would call them. They were being pushed, or someone even said they'd been fired so many times, they felt that it was time to run their own business. To being unhappy with the job, that was quite a common reason given, pretty unhappy with corporate life and what it has to offer them. And some started because of life balance. They wanted a better life balance. So this could be, for example, starting a family, which instigated them to start a business, or someone said they simply wanted to work less hours, for example. Family tradition or ambition could be carrying on a family tradition. That was quite a common example as well, or simply one's own ambition. Self-awareness, some people have said that they were pretty much aware of their own strengths and weaknesses. They knew what they wanted. They knew that they didn't like authority. They didn't like to be told what to do. And I've heard that comment made several times as well. I don't know if that's an indication of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, not liking authority, but and they also wanted more control to the job, to the work that they do. And that was one of the reasons. So that was more what I would call an internally driven factor as to why they started their own business. And then there were others who would say they've done the research in the market and they realized there was a gap in the market. Some people would say they wanted to make more money, and they realized that, you know, leaving their jobs and actually being starting consultancy would bring them more money than actually working as an employee. or it could be a management buyout situation where the owner was retiring and therefore the management team wanted to take over the business. So a whole range of reasons. And what I would say is there doesn't seem to be any predominant or overriding reason why we start a business. And obviously, business owners, as we know, come in different shapes and sizes, and we all have different reasons for starting. So you can't really pigeon us into one or two neat little categories there. And I just want to bring your attention to this quote. And I love to pick up some quotes from business owners during our interviews, which sort of encapsulates what this slide is trying to illustrate. So hubris of corporate life, we all know what that is. Just, the arrogance, shall we say, or the confidence of having of being in a corporate life, or having a certain status or a certain role or position in a company, and that is really true. And another quote was, "But again, if I knew this, how hard it was to start a business, I probably wouldn't start a company." And that has been said a couple of times before, so I thought I'd mention that. Starting a business is equivalent to a series of structured and controlled experiments in different aspects of the business. I feel that's really quite true when we're first starting out in business, that we are really experimenting with the audience, with who our ideal client is. We don't always know who they are, and therefore experimenting, conducting little experiments that don't cost us the earth, and monitoring the results of that is part and parcel of what startups do. So I'll leave the quotes with you to stew for a while. And if you'd like to come back to me on that towards the end of the session, you're more than welcome to. So next we come to the other question, which was asked during the interview, and that was, what has been the most important lesson learned from starting and running your own business? So with that question asked, that was taking the business owner back to the beginning, to when they started, and looking back what they know now and what they knew then. So it was interesting asking that question, because I had a whole range of answers here, which I was trying to categorize all these answers into these few categories. Well, I think there are 10 categories here. So some people mentioned, we have a large group of people who mention planning and making good business decisions. That was important. Some people that said they wish they did more planning, they wish they'd done more research into their business before starting it. And because they didn't do the research and therefore they didn't come up with a good business decision, so they wish I'd made this decision or that decision. Also, a couple of people mentioned the importance of marketing, that they wished they'd known how important marketing was, or how it would have helped them in their business. Some mentioned having a business network was important. Also investing in yourself or taking advice. That was also a large chunk of responses there. Getting a mentor, for example, was one of the things that were mentioned there. Also, importance of sales and customer service. We had comments from business owners saying that when they were in a large organization, they never knew they never knew they had to sell. It wasn't really a necessary skill to learn. They just had to know their specific role or product very well, but they were never asked to sell. And therefore it came as a bit of a shock to them when they realized that running your own business almost always means that you kind of have to get comfortable selling. Unless, of course, you are able to delegate that skill to a member of a team or a partner. A few people mentioned the importance of testing and experimenting at the startup stage at the beginning. And then having the right skill sets or team as being important. Right skill sets or team could mean a partner or hiring the right people in this case. And also we have a couple of responses around mindset, which is being patient, for example. So there's something to be said about overestimating what we can achieve in 1 year and underestimating what we can achieve in say 5 or 10 years. So being patient is quite an important attribute mentioned. Being confident as well. And I think this was mentioned in relation to pricing. Being confident enough to charge, for example, the prices that we charge. So that was brought up several times. And then the other mindset or attribute was being resilient or resourceful. That came up quite a bit as well. So the key lessons here are well, I've named the top 3 key lessons from the pie chart. So the first one is investing in yourself or taking advice. That's the largest chunk of the pie chart. And the importance of marketing, sales, customer service, that's the other chunk that's quite important. And thirdly, planning and making good business decisions. That's also quite an important skill that was mentioned. And a couple of quotes here. Somebody said, selling is not what clients need, but really what they want. And I thought that stuck with me. It's not what clients need, but it's actually what they want when we sell. And the other quote was, you might have, and this was in relation to a new business idea. So a business owner said to me, you might have 100 people who say, well, that's a great idea. But until someone actually says, well, that's a great idea, I will put so much money into it. You're wasting your time, I'm afraid. So that was quite poignant, I thought, when he mentioned that to me, relating his own experiences with new product development. So advice to startups. So that's the last pie chart, in case you're wondering if there's going to be an endless stream of pie charts. No, that's the last one. So the last, one of the other questions that was asked was, what advice would you give to future startups, in particular to those who come from the corporate sector or have been in professional jobs, who have now been pushed or pulled to the idea of running their own business? So that was the question asked for this particular response. So we've got, again, a whole range of responses. I would say that the responses here, they more or less do have overlaps with the previous slides, which was asking them about lessons learned. So it was taking a business owner back to the beginning and asking them, you know, what lessons have they learned? So this particular slide was advice to startups, more a forward-looking question, asking them. So I suppose I would say with the the responses that we get here, it's interesting, as you can see, there are overlaps here between this and the previous responses. But it's also interesting that cultivating the right mindset, which is what you can see here, cultivating the right mindset, meaning perseverance, for example, resilience, or in having integrity. That's quite a large chunk of the pie chart here. It's 21%, 22% of the pie chart. This wasn't really pointed out in the previous slide that much. It was sort of mentioned here, but I think here you can see that this was much more embedded in terms of giving advice to startups. Right. So there, as I said, there's some overlaps between this and the previous chart about lessons learned. So obviously, the conclusion I can draw from here is that business owners would draw their advice from the lessons they had learned themselves when they started their own business, and if then applied the advice, apply the lessons learned to the advice they would then give to future startups. And you can see it here on this chart, which I don't think I'll be going through the pie chart in detail. As you can see here, a couple of overlaps there, but the key advice that's being shared here is, number one, cultivating the right mindset seems to be the most important advice given. And number two, planning and researching the business is the second most important bit of advice given. And the third is to learn marketing, sales, and pitching. So that seems to be the most important skill, or one of the most important skill sets being brought up for startups. And I'll leave you with a slide with a quote. When taking advice from people around your idea, if they've not got experience in your arena and they're not your ideal client, then any advice they will give you will be coming from their limitations. This statement really stuck with me, and I thought that's actually quite true. It may seem a little bit harsh, but it's actually quite true. I think in general, my take is I think we have to be quite cautious who we take advice from, where this person is coming from, what experience has he or she have before we decide if we want to take advice from that person. So it's with that in mind, with that mindset before we decide to accept advice from specific people or specific groups. And I think that's quite sensible advice given. I don't know what you think. Perhaps you can let me know after the session. So what's my take from all these findings and interviews that we've read? We've essentially read through hundreds of pages of interviews here. So what's my take at the end of it? Obviously, I have to say that there's still quite a bit of data that I have not managed to present in these slides, simply because we will run out of time if I do. But what I've done is managed to put into these pie charts just highlights of these findings from the interviews. So insights from the survey. So talking about our personal journeys can be cathartic. And I realize that as business owners, we often have our highs and our lows. We often have to put up a brave front to our team, to our family members, or to the outside world most of the time. So it's actually great to be able to talk about our personal journeys with someone or in a group that actually understands where we're each coming from. We may not get that understanding sometimes from friends and family, as you know. So I feel that we don't often get asked these sorts of questions as business owners, and therefore we don't get much of an opportunity to discuss these issues. And for me, listening to a business owner talk about experiences that I've been through, that was actually priceless for me. And going through this whole process actually validated for me a few of my own beliefs and ideas about running my own business. So as I said, there's a lot more data that we haven't actually covered and analyzed in this presentation, but I hope that covering these few main highlights is helpful for you. The other thing I wanted to mention, which I haven't mentioned yet in this slide, is there are 3 must-haves for startup founders, looking at the interviews and the responses that we've received. And I'll just recap what these 3 are. Invest in themselves and take advice. So that was what was mentioned quite predominantly in the last 2 slides. So investing in themselves and taking advice, therefore, will help us to cultivate the right mindset. And also the other feedback was to research and plan ahead. That seems to be pretty important. And in doing that, obviously that would help us as business owners to make good business decisions. The other skill sets that were mentioned quite often was sales and marketing skills. So these came out as pretty important skill sets there. And I suppose these skill sets we can conclude is what a team should have, even though the business owners themselves may or may not possess that skill sets. But it was important to make sure that as a team that they do have these skills. So these are the 3 must-haves for startup founders to help them pull through the challenges that they face. And that, I suppose, concludes my presentation on this survey.